Hey, this is Pastor Bunjee Garrett, and I want to take some time today to present you with another word of encouragement. Well, just in case you haven't heard, it was just yesterday morning. That's when two Arab gunmen, both residents in the West Bank, they brutally murdered 6 innocent civilians at a bus stop in Jerusalem. Not only that, but they also wounded more than 20 people before being shot dead by an off-duty soldier. One first responder shared his testimony of the scene by declaring, and I quote him here, "When we arrived, we saw people lying unconscious on the road, on the side of the road, and on the sidewalk near a bus stop. There was a lot of destruction, shattered glass on the floor, and a lot of commotion." One elderly woman who was actually on the bus that was being attacked, she shared her experience by informing us that there was gunfire like nothing she'd ever experienced. With this in mind, we ought to be praying for the families that have been affected by this horrific act of terrorism. And, after arriving on the scene, that's when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he sympathized with the families of the victims, and he also responded to this terrorist attack by assuring the state of Israel that they're going to continue to fight this war against terrorism on every front. Here's how he put it, and I quote, "We are at war, an intense war against terror on several fronts. At first, I want to send my condolences to the families of the murdered and, of course, wish a full recovery to the wounded. When I say we are at an intense war on several fronts, we have tremendous successes against terrorist regimes, against terrorist organizations, but the war continues also in the Gaza Strip, where we will destroy Hamas as we promised, and we will release our hostages, all hostages." With these words, Prime Minister Netanyahu has assured the state of Israel that they're going to continue fighting this war against terrorism and on every front. This includes their war against the Houthis, against Hamas, against the Palestinian Authority, all of whom celebrated yesterday's terror attack in Jerusalem. Making good on this promise, Netanyahu went on to order Israel Defense Forces to intensify operations across Judea and Samaria, otherwise known as the West Bank, as they continue dismantling terrorist infrastructure wherever it exists. And at the same time, Israel's campaign against Hamas, it also intensified yesterday as the IDF is preparing now for a full-scale ground assault on Gaza. And as for those who take issue with this war against terrorism, I encourage you to consider the Constitution of Hamas. Here's how the official Constitution of Hamas explains their own goal, and I quote, "Palestine is a land that was seized by a racist, anti-human, and colonial Zionist project that was founded on a false promise, the Balfour Declaration, on recognition of a usurping entity, and on imposing a fait accompli by force." In other words, the Gazan government, which is basically run by Hamas, will only accept the full and complete liberation of what they call Palestine, which includes the Palestine state that extends from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. The same constitution also presents us with the following goal, and I quote again, "Palestine symbolizes the resistance that shall continue until liberation is accomplished, until the return is fulfilled, and until a fully sovereign state is established with Jerusalem as its capital." To put it in other words, the Syrian leader Hafez al-Assad, he goes on to tell us this. He says, "We shall only accept war and the restoration of the usurped land to oust you aggressors and throw you into the sea for good." That's right, the goal of these Muslim Arabs is war until Israel's wiped from the map from the river to the sea. Those who suggest otherwise, well, they're either gaslighting us or they themselves have been deceived by Palestinian propaganda. Listen, those who insist that the so-called Palestinians are simply looking for a defined space within the land of Israel, they're failing to consider the stated position of Hamas. Here's how Hamas puts it in their published constitution, and I quote them again, "Palestine is an Arab Islamic land. It is a blessed sacred land that has a special place in the heart of every Arab and every Muslim." So yeah, according to Hamas, Palestine is a land that is for Arabs, or those who submit to Allah. Just to be clear about the boundaries of the land that they call Palestine, the same charter provides us with the borders of Palestine according to their definition. And here's how they put it. Palestine, which extends from the River Jordan in the east to the Mediterranean in the west, and from Ras al-Nakura in the north to al-Rashrash in the south, is an integral territorial unit. It is the land and the home of the Palestinian people. In other words, the land of Palestine, according to Hamas, is the same region that the Bible calls the land of Israel. Not only that, but the same charter also assures us that the only people who have a right to live in this land are Arabs and or those who submit to Allah. Simply put, they would have us to believe that Israelis have no right to live in Israel. Here's how the leaders of Hamas explain it in their published charter, and I quote again. The expulsion and banishment of the Palestinian people from their land and the establishment of the Zionist entity therein do not annul the right of the Palestinian people to their entire land and do not entrench any rights therein for the usurping Zionist entity. In other words, the Zionist entity, which we call the State of Israel, has, according to them, no right to the land that they call Palestine. Therefore, those who chant, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, they're literally calling for the genocide of the Jews. Further proof of my point can be found in the following statement, which is found in the published Hamas charter, which I quote again. Hamas believes that no part of the land of Palestine shall be compromised or conceded irrespective of the causes, the circumstances, and the pressures, and no matter how long the occupation lasts. Hamas rejects any alternative to the full and complete liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea. In other words, the Gazan government, which was elected by the majority there in Gaza, is only interested in a one-state solution. They don't want a two-state solution. And listen, they have no plan to end their attacks on the state of Israel, like we saw yesterday, until the entire land from the river to the sea is cleansed from the so-called Zionist entity. And with this as the goal, they chant, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. As we consider this chant, let's consider how the UK's former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, explains this chant. See, according to her understanding, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, is a slogan that is, and I quote her here, widely understood as a demand for the destruction of Israel. She added this, and I quote, attempts to pretend otherwise are disingenuous. That's right. Those who try to tell you that this chant isn't really a call for the genocide of the Jews, they're being disingenuous, and at the same time, they're being deceptive. Thankfully, since October the 7th, Prime Minister Netanyahu, I believe, finally realizes that Israel must take control over their land from the river to the sea. And here's how he explained it back in January when he declared, in the future, the state of Israel has to control the entire area from the river to the sea. That's right, the state of Israel must control the land of Israel, which extends from the river to the sea, according to the promise that the Lord presented to the descendants of Israel. It's actually in Genesis chapter 13 where the Lord spoke to our father Abraham and declared this. He says, lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see, I give to you and your descendants forever. The land that God gave to Abraham was given to his descendants forever. And just to be clear, this promise was then passed down through Abraham's son Isaac, and again through Isaac's son Jacob, who was then renamed Israel. Here's how King David explained it in the 105th Psalm. Beginning at verse 6, he declares, O seed of Abraham, his servant, you children of Jacob, his chosen ones, he is the Lord our God. His judgments are in all the earth. He remembers his covenants forever. The word which he commanded for 1,000 generations, the covenant which he made with Abraham and his oath to Isaac, and confirmed it to Jacob for a statute, to Israel as an everlasting covenant, saying, to you I will give the land of Canaan as the allotment of your inheritance. That's right, the land of promise. It belongs to Abraham's descendants through Isaac, not Ishmael. And listen, the land of promise doesn't belong to Esau. No, instead it belongs to the descendants of Jacob. And according to the Lord, the deed to the land of Israel was given as an everlasting covenant. What this means is that those who have an issue with Israel securing the borders of their own land, your issue is with God. Your issue is with God, who sovereignly gave them this land as an everlasting inheritance. As a Christian, I rejoice in God's decision to restore the children of Israel back into their land. And one reason why is because this brings us one step closer to the second coming of Jesus Christ. As for those who attempt to demonize the state of Israel for their decision to defend their own land, I encourage you, go read Revelation chapter 19. There we learn about the second coming of Jesus Christ. And according to John the Revelator, the Lord is going to return and he's going to lay waste to the armies that are attacking the nation of Israel. And it's in Revelation 19 verse 21 where John sums up the battle by informing us that the enemies of Israel will be killed with the sword which proceeds from the mouth of him who sat on the horse, and all the birds were filled with their flesh. In other words, the second coming of Jesus Christ will culminate in the violent death of all Israel's enemies. And with that being the case, it's crucial for every Christian to warn the world about this day of destruction. Let's love people enough to go and tell them the truth about the day of wrath, which is going to come upon the world. And as we do, let's present every unbeliever with the good news. Let's present the Jew and Gentile alike with the good news that we can be saved from the wrath of God by faith in Jesus Christ. And in this way, the Holy Spirit will empower us so that we can fight the good fight of faith and all for the glory of God.